What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Mtg, we like that magic stuff. And today, we got some Kaldheim spoilers for you, babies. Wait, what? Kaldheim's over? Okay, it seemed like it went pretty fast. What? Strixhaven. Already? You sure? If you say so. What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Mtg, we like it of magic. And today, we got some Strixhaven previews. Apparently, I'm just as surprised as you are, but Wizards decided to go ahead and unveil the entire command cycle. This is 5 modal spells, 1 from each house at the magical school of Strixhaven. But there's 5. It's not Harry Potter. There are 4 houses in Harry Potter. There are 5 in Strixhaven, so it's not Harry Potter, guys. Anywho, all 5 houses are enemy color combinations, and they're all named after the Elder Dragon that started the house in the first place, which I guess is cool because I'm always down for more Elder Dragons. That's something that other fantasy wizarding school franchises don't have, is Elder Dragons. We get those, so that's pretty dope. But anyway, all 5 of these cards look pretty cool, but they're definitely not all created equal for what it's worth. Some of them look way better than others. So today we're going to go through and kind of try to rank them all. And I'm pretty sure my ranking's going to be a little bit off. You'll get at me in the comments section about that. But we can all have fun sitting down and talking about all 5 Strixhaven cards that we know of. Now, the first of these I'm going to talk about is the one that I like the least, but that doesn't mean it's not a cool spell. We got Silver Quill Command right here, the old edgy boy house. The definitely not Slytherin house command. Costs 4 mana, 2, a white and a black to cast, and it's a sorcery. Like all of these, you choose 2 of these modes. First mode, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. Second mode, return target creature with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Third mode is target player draws a card and loses a life. And finally, target opponent sacrifices a creature. Let's talk about the good things first, because there are some good things about the card, and I'll kind of go in order of the modes. Mode 1 can close a game out, but obviously it's not a super great looking mode. It's just kind of a sorcery speed would-be combat trick if it weren't sorcery speed. But, you know, at least it can get a creature through for a whole lot of damage. Although I do kind of hate that you can't return a creature from your graveyard and then give it the +3/+3 in flying, like if it has haste or something. That would be cool. It can't do that the way this card works. That kind of points off for that, but still. The first mode is decent when combined with some other modes, because getting damage through and making your opponent sacrifice a creature might be pretty decent, especially if their only creature is a flying creature. You're just guaranteed to get through like 5 or 6 damage. So first mode is kind of okay, but not amazing. As far as the second mode, it's probably the one that I like the most. You can get back like Luminarch Aspirant, Seasoned Hallowblade if it had to go to the graveyard, Selfless Savior, All Seed of Life's Bounty. There's a lot of cool creatures you can get back with that mode, and it kind of makes it worth it when combined with other modes. Like mode 2 and 4 together look pretty good for like reestablishing the board state, you know, swinging the pendulum in your favor in terms of the board. So I kind of like 2 and 4 together, but I also like mode 3 a good bit because this mode actually makes this like the only card of this cycle that straight up replaces itself with another actual card without having to do anything else, like sack a permanent, or like you just get a land back or something. You know, like all these cards can generate some form of card advantage or card selection or card parity. They all have a baked-in mode for that, except for one of them. We'll get to that. But this one actually just straight up replaces itself. You don't have to do anything else. And that's kind of interesting, especially when combined with some of the other modes on the card. But all things considered, this is very expensive, and it's sorcery speed. I just think there's way better 4-mana stuff you can be doing in your Orzhov deck right now. And for that matter, even when you put together 2 modes on this card, I'm just not sure that it's worth being sorcery speed unless you're doing something like some really powerful combo, but that remains to be seen. Now, the ability to reanimate a 2-mana dude is going to be somewhat important as new cards come out, and as we see more cards from Strixhaven in the next set. So, like, that mode could be decent as time goes by, and it's probably my favorite mode on the card, but all things considered, I think this is the weakest one of the cycle, because not only are the modes a little low impact by themselves, but it's also really expensive and sorcery speed, just all the bad things. Now, the next one in line is one that I see a lot of people bagging on, but I actually kind of like this card. I very likely shouldn't because it's 5 mana. It's Lorehold Command. 3, a red and a white for an instant, where you choose 2. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible and haste until end of turn. Lorehold Command deals 3 damage to any target. Target player gains 3 life. Or you sacrifice a permanent, then draw 2 cards. Alright, so as usual, the good things, before we get to the bad stuff, because there's really only one terrible thing about this card. But as far as the good stuff, it's 4 damage on an empty board, and you get a guy, that's something, you know. It can save your dudes from a sweeper spell when cast at instant speed, or it can get you in for a really big attack, you know, and give anything else that you happen to have gotten that turn haste. So if you have like a planeswalker that makes dudes or something, you probably won't have a whole lot of other mana to work with to cast creatures, right? But, you know, if you have another way of getting creatures, then giving them haste might be cool. There's some good things about the first couple of modes on this card. You know, you can ambush your opponent with a blocker that has indestructible, so it'll probably kill whatever it blocks and stick around. So just the first 2 modes on this card are decent, and you can cast this on like any board state, but you can't necessarily say about some of the other ones. The other cards require spells in the stack or targets on the battlefield, whereas this one, not necessarily. Like, you just create a guy and give it haste and indestructible or something, or you just create a guy and then sack a land to the 4th mode, the Perilous Research mode. That's the thing, is that Perilous Research apparently costs 5 mana in Boros colors. It kind of sucks, but I do like having access to a Perilous Research type effect in Standard, especially at instant speed, so kind of actually a fan of the last mode on this card. And you also get a Lightning Helix mode, so like that seems good, you know. Like, blowing people out is somewhat possible with this, but it does cost 5 mana, you know. Like, just giving all your blockers indestructible and +1/+0 is good enough, but also being able to Lightning Helix that guy off the table or whatever, create a guy of your own, draw a couple of cards in Boros, like, oh, this is somewhat desirable, and I like every mode on the card, you know. I feel like in some ways, each mode on this card is a tiny bit more powerful than a lot of modes on other cards, and the card doesn't necessarily have a bad mode, which can't be said about any of the other commands, but this is 5 mana. It's 5 mana at instant speed, and that's like so much. It's so much that I don't really think you'll end up playing this card in just about anything, just tempering my own expectations a little bit, because 5 mana is way more than you'd think. So I'm not really sure this ends up going in like anything, and if it does go in something, it's probably kind of a control-y card, and it's not great for those purposes. I think you got better options in the 5-drop slot. So I'm not saying I'm super like excited about the card, but I think I'm slightly more impressed with the card than some other people, because it has some interesting blowout potential, and it doesn't need like any specific situational board state to be decent. Now, the next 3 are all much, much better, in my opinion. This is where we take a huge leap up in terms of playability, but we're going to talk about Quandrix Command next, and I just want to make it clear that I actually really, really like this card and all of the other commands going forward. Quandrix Command is 3 mana, 1 a green and a blue for an instant. You choose 2. Return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, and/or target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Now, one thing I want to say about this is that I like that it can blow out both Embercleave and the Great Henge. Like, 2 problem cards from Throne of Eldraine. This does really good work against both of them, whether it's, you know, countering the Great Henge or Embercleave for that matter. Or, you know, you're bouncing the creature they're trying to put Embercleave on while you counter the Embercleave. There's just a lot of cool things that this does against specific problem artifacts that in Standard right now, and I like that kind of work. I will say that the first mode, just having this kind of bounce effect, is probably overshadowed by cards like Brazen Borrower, they're just like way better than this. But this as a combat trick looks really, really good. You know, you get to Brazen Borrower something in combat. And also make one of your dudes bigger, maybe, so that it can block better. There's just a bunch of ways to blow out combat specifically with a card like this, while also having kind of a mini Sublime Epiphany, you know, counter that Great Henge and return, like, whatever to your hand, you know, a 4 or 5 mana creature to your hand. Seems like actually really, really good for only 3 mana. But at the same time, 3 mana isn't only 3 mana. Like, 3 mana can be kind of expensive, especially on a card that requires like very specific game states. You know, they have to be casting an artifact or an enchantment or whatever. And that's, don't know how I feel about that, because like sometimes this is going to be an amazing blowout, main deckable, enchantment and artifact hate card. And then sometimes it's kind of sitting in your hand, waiting for the right time. Soak up your mana during your turns while you're waiting for the right time to cast it, because you have to hold up mana for it. You're not doing other stuff. By the time you do cast it, is it really as impactful as you want it to be? I'm just not sure. I will say that you having a creature to put counters on and them having a creature or something to pop back to their hand, or even a planeswalker, is a fairly common occurrence. You shouldn't have to wait around all day for that. But to make this card as powerful as you want it to be, you make it a mini Sublime Epiphany. Basically, again, counter that Great Hinge and return the Kazandu Mammoth to your hand or something. To get the most powerful modes out of it, I think you kind of have to wait for situational game states that will eventually happen, but the entire time you're waiting on them to happen, it just kind of sits in your hand. Again, soaks up your turns while you're holding mana up for it. So I'm just not super convinced that this is as good as I think it is, but I do think the card is very, very good. Whether it ends up seeing play, I'm not sure, because again, 3 mana might be slightly awkward for what this does. But again, just like I'll say with pretty much all of these, 4 modes is a lot of modes, and versatility is always key on these charm type cards. And this card has enough versatility that in almost any game state it can do something for you. But to do the truly powerful stuff, I think you have to wait for game states that aren't going to happen all the time. So I'm not sure the card is as good as I want it to be, but I do want it to be very good. Now I keep going back and forth on which card should be number 1 here. And I'm still not sure that Witherbloom Command should be number 2, but I do think the sorcery speed does hurt this card a little bit. But it is really, really cheap. It's only 2 mana. You got to pay Golgari colors, and then you're done. You choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards, then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Target creature gets -3/-1 until end of turn, and or target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Now again, let's talk about the good, because there's a lot of good on this card, and not a whole lot of bad. Sorcery speed is just about the only really kind of terrible thing about this card. I guess you could make the argument that some of the modes are a little low impact, but for instance, mode number... Why am I talking about the bad first? I'm going to forsake because there's so much good stuff to talk about. Might as well get the bad out of the way. The 4th mode on this is one of the more low impact modes on any of these. I think you could maybe say that the 4th mode on Quandrix, the one that makes you shuffle 3 cards back into your library, is probably the least impactful mode on any of these. But I will say, apart from the game that it's going to win you 1 out of every 50 games, the 4th mode is probably the least impactful, easily on the card, but also of a lot of these commands. So I don't love the 4th mode, but it might come in handy every now and again, right? But aside from that, all the other modes are pretty good. This replaces itself for the cheapest of any of the commands. The problem is that it replaces itself with a land. So that kind of sucks. But you do get to mill yourself if that's what your deck wants to do. You get to mill your opponent if that's what your deck wants to do. Put this in your Ruin Crab deck and get back your Fabled Passage with this, so you can pop it with the Ruin Crab and play. All of that makes sense. First mode is not bad at all. But in any case, I like the removal mode on this too. This takes out Seasoned Hallow Blades on curve before they can stick a Maul of the Skyclaves to it. That's a very important mode on the card. It also kills Selfless Saviors and stuff. That's important too. I think that especially, going into combat or on your second main phase, more likely, you're going to be using the removal spell mode on this card a good little bit. So I don't mind the removal aspect of this. It takes out a lot of X1s. I talked about Seasoned Hallowblade, but there's also Fervent Champion, Luminarch Aspirin if they didn't put the counter on it. There's all kinds of stuff that removal mode takes out. Of course, then there's the real removal mode on the card, which I actually wrote down a whole bunch of stuff this blows up, because it doesn't look like it blows up a lot of stuff. And in Standard, it might not, but I actually think the farther back you go in formats, the better this mode gets. So at just 2 mana, I know it's sorcery speed, but this could end up seeing play in other formats that have plenty of cheap, high-profile targets for a mode like this. But just in Standard, you can blow up Trail of Crumbs. That's a pretty good target. Maze Mine Tome, Graft Digger's Cage out of the sideboard, Sorcerer's Spyglass out of the sideboard, Weathered Runestone out of the sideboard. So the card gets way better in Game 2. Witch's Oven, In Search of Greatness, if that ever becomes a thing. Pyre of Heroes, if that ever becomes a card that people play. And then anything, basically, that gets printed in the next couple of years in Standard, this can take out. So this gives them a safety valve to print really powerful 2-mana enchantments and stuff. And they've already done that. So this actually can take out more stuff than you might think. The problem is not only the sorcery speed, though, it's also the relatively high opportunity cost, which I guess I could say about a lot of these commands, you know, like I kind of said it with Quandrix's command. Does this really go like in your deck? Does it make the cut? And I feel kind of the same way, or in so many words I said that. I feel like I tried to get that point across. Like there's just better things you could be doing on such and such turn. There's better things you could be holding up mana for. And I kind of feel the same way about Witherbloom Command. You know, is the opportunity cost really worth it to include this card in your deck when you could be doing other stuff for 2 mana, right? But this is one of those cases where I think the versatility really makes up for the sort of awkward nature of the card, you know? This is one of those where you can cast it on an empty board, you know, make your opponent lose 2, you gain 2, mill 3 cards, get a land back, and that's not bad. But was that really worth 2 mana? Again, you have to wait for specific game states where you can kill that guy, and this card isn't going to kill that guy all the time. Or you can kill that Trail of Crumbs, and your opponent isn't going to be playing Trail of Crumbs all the time. So, you know, even with the added versatility on a card like this, it has so many modes. Are you waiting on specific game states, and would it be better just to include a different card in your deck? Again, I think the opportunity cost is relatively high on a lot of these, but especially on a card like Witherbloom, which looks way better in like game 2, so is it even a best of 1 card? These are questions you have to ask. So even though I'm excited about this card because of how cheap it is and how much I do like some of the modes, I'm still not sure ultimately that it ends up seeing as much play as I initially think it might. I have to temper my expectation. That's what this is. It's an exercise in checking yourself, because I think this card is really good, but that doesn't mean it is really good. You see, Magic players... I could go off on a whole thing here, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Let's get to the last card. Now, even I am a little surprised that this card ended up at number 1, but it's Prismari Command. This is 3 mana, 1 a red and a blue for an instant. That's pivotal. You choose 2. Prismari Command deals 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards. Target player creates a treasure token, or destroy target artifact. So a lot of the reasons I like this card are meta-specific, like standard-specific right now. Like one of the reasons I like this is because it's a main deck way for like the Is It Counters deck, I guess we're calling it, the Is It Control deck, to take out an Embercleave that hits the table, or, you know, a Great Hinge, God forbid, Great Hinge hits the table. That deck's game is just over, but now you have a main deckable way to deal with those problem artifacts, and I think that's really important, especially in this color combination. To be able to do that. I mean, you already had, you know, red ways of taking out artifacts, but I don't think any of those were truly main deckable except for maybe Shredded Sails, which is a decent card. But I think in a lot of ways, this card might be better than Shredded Sails. You know, first of all, the first mode on this is just Shock, and that's actually not bad. You know, like another meta-dependent reason I like this, the sort of deck-dependent reason I like this in Is It Control, is because at the end of their turn 3, you can basically shock their Robber of the Rich, Luminarch Aspirant, whatever. You shock their guy, and you create a treasure token at the end of turn 3. That means that on turn 4, you can untap, play a land, and play Goldspan Dragon that turn, a turn early. And you were able to affect the board with that play, too, because you shocked creatures. So I think that's actually like a really good line for these Is It decks, and, you know, not only can you take that line, but the ability to create a treasure token on this card works way better in any deck that carries Goldspan Dragon. You know, if you have a Goldspan Dragon out, you cast this, get a treasure token off of it, well, it really only costs you 1 mana to cast the spell. So, like, there are a lot of really cool, again, deck-specific reasons why I think this slots into Is It Control, and I don't think any of the other cards slot into an existing deck, so that gets a lot of points to this. And no, that wasn't a Harry Potter joke. Just because I give points to a thing does not mean I'm referencing HP. But anyway, yeah, there are some bad things about the card too. You know, all these modes are relatively low impact compared to some of the other modes on some of the other cards. You know, I feel like you have a higher number of low impact modes on a card like this, but it goes so well in a specific deck that I'm willing to give it a lot of credit when compared to the other commands, you know. So there is that, and 3 mana might be a smidge too much. You know, 3 mana might just be too much, again, for the opportunity cost inherent in playing a card like this in your deck. Could other cards do better things? In this case, I'm not actually sure, you know? You know, it's an Is It Charm that's just super powered. And does better stuff than Is It Charm does in a lot of ways. Although it does have a mode that's very similar to Is It Charm. But in any case, you know, it's never dead, and I like that. Some of these other why did I say sagas? Some of these other commands that we've talked about today, I've specifically bagged on for like, oh, you need specific game states for this to be as good as it can possibly be. And that may be a little bit true of this card too, but not as much as some of the other commands, All of these are decent even in just about any board state. You can do 2 damage to your opponent's dome, or 2 damage to a target, and draw 2 and discard 2. That's always going to be a fairly live mode on this card. So, I like that you can cast this almost whenever, and it's fine. You don't need to wait on a specific state. And if you're looking for a specific card on the end of turn 3, oh, I need another land, or I need the sweeper for turn 4 or whatever, then this is a pretty good way to cycle through cards too. An instant speed divination effect that makes you let go of cards is actually pretty decent in and of itself. And the fact that you have to discard the cards isn't necessarily a downside either, depending on what your deck is doing. So I like a lot about this card, and I think it might be just day one the best of these cards, but I do think that cards like Witherbloom that have a really important removal mode on them, the thing that destroys a 2-mana permanent that's not a creature or a land, cards like that have modes on them that could be important going into the future, I think are worth looking out for. But for the time being, I think this is the best one. Just ramping to 5 mana, like end of turn 3, play this ramp. That's really not bad for your Izzet deck. Even if you're not playing Goldspin on the next turn. Igby was really like thrashing around and writhing, and I'm not sure why. I think he was just really comfortable. But I felt like he needed to be picked up and set right. You doing all right, bud? You doing good? Yeah, you're comfy. But anyway, that's all 5 Strixhaven cards that we know literally. You all right? Oh, you're trying to own the table. He's trying to like brush his head up against the table because he owns it. That's right. It's your table, buddy. It's your table. It's not mine. You bought it. With your kitty money. But anyway, that's all the cards from Strixhaven that we know so far. Apparently the set comes out in like late April in paper, which means it'll come out a couple of weeks before that on Arena like it usually does. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see actual spoilers for the set like in the next month. Moving pretty fast, but, that space between the January set and the April set is always really quick. It's like a blink, but I was surprised to get spoilers this early, but apparently Wizards is pretty excited about this set. Which, I would be if I were them too. But anyway, let me know. It's your turn. Let me know how you feel about these cards and my ranking of them down there in the comments section, because especially with the last 3 cards, I think this could almost go in like any order, and it would be acceptable. So let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments and how you feel about the cards in general, and do all the YouTube stuff. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more Strixhaven content, I guess, but we're knee-deep in like Kaldheim Deck Techs and stuff like that right now, so subscribe for that too. There's still a bunch of Kaldheim to be explored in this format. Aside from that, if you want to help out around here, go to the Patreon, patreon.com/SBMTG, link in the description. $1 a month is all I really ask from you, and then you'll be able to vote on what stuff we do here on the channel, so that's fun. Aside from that, if you want to watch me play some Magic, go to twitch.tv/SBMTGdev or hit the link in the description. Following is free, and I really appreciate your follow. We have a lot of fun on the stream. We do. We're friends. But aside from that, I guess I'm done. So I will catch y'all very, very soon, because we've got a couple of deck techs that I'm excited about coming up, and we got to do Strixhaven predictions before they spoil all the cards. So make sure you sub to the channel for all that content, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.